Mbeya University of Science and Technology is one of the beautiful universities in the southern part of Tanzania. It is within that particular university where I am officially available, but currently I am doing my PhD in India, particularly to the northern eastern part of the country in India, to the states called Assam, under the University of Tezpur in Mbeya. And I am doing in ecology and biodiversity lab, within the particular lab where you can find me. Last times I uploaded some videos relevant, related to how do we write a statement of the problems. That was a part which is the sections within the introductory aspect of the introductory. And today I am planning to discuss with you some aspect related to research objectives. Writing and formulating of these research objectives, questions and hypotheses and even assumption is one of the contradicting sections of the research related activities, and most of the supervisors and other observers, while presenting your proposal or a research project or whatever, is the mostly questionables, discourageables, showing some sort of interactions from which a lot of questions arise from how we formulate our objectives, how we write our hypothesis, and how we formulate these research questions. So several questions may arise from these sections as regarding to what should be written on that particular areas. Should we write a research question first, or should we write a research objectives, or should we write a research hypothesis? These are some of the questions that may arise among us while we are preparing for that particular scenario. We should actually know what could be, in fact, the differences between these terms. What is the difference between the research objectives? What could be differ from the research questions and the hypothesis, or sometimes the assumptions. How can I properly just write and formulate these research objectives, and how could it differ from the research hypothesis and research objectives? How do I find the difference between these two terms that generally don't get word? The research concept and techniques under my YouTube will be providing to you some relevant information today regarding to this contradicting aspect of research work. And we will discuss altogether, particularly on aspect related, how do we opt, why do we use the research hypothesis, why do we use the research questions, under what condition do we opt for research questions, and what scenario do we opt for research questions or hypotheses or assumptions. All these scenarios I will be discussing with you with relevant examples from which we'll be understanding it in a practical sense, and at the end of the day you'll be in a position to tell what could be the differences between these two. So it is correct to write both null hypothesis and alternative hypothesis, or it should be light simply null hypothesis. Why do we do these things? All these things should be in fact discussed within the next series. So be in position to follow. Research objectives as a part of the chapter 1, which is an introduction. Generally, there are two types of these research objectives, of which we have the so-called the general objective and the specific objectives. What does it imply, and what does it mean, and what does the research objective is? Generally, when we are talking of the research objectives, it comes after the background information, or sometimes the statement of the problems, and sometimes it comes after the research questions or aims of the study. This could vary depending on the format of the particular institution from which you are doing your work. And generally, when we speak of the research objectives, this is tell us on what the researcher intended to cover in a particular topic of his study. It's nothing rather, it is a statement that gives the directions of what exactly would take place to answer the particular hypothesized questions or the question that were in fact thought before you are planning to carry out your work. It specifies the activities to be undertaken. This is now the research objectives. And then there are some features, two important features of which I would like to share with you today, that a research objective should be interlinked to the preceding informations, the topic, and it should also be linked to the next stages of the study. That wherever after you have constructed your research objectives, it's the one that will reflect the questions or the hypothesis under which the study will be undertaken. And it should reflect the method or techniques for data correction. It is from the specific objective that we are going to know and reflect what are the methods that could be undertaken in stock consideration. And today I'll be giving you some relevant examples from which you'll be in the position to know this is the general objectives, how do we state the general and how do we state the specific objective, what are the important verbs should be used. Generally, we have different scenarios, we call it the modalities of the research objectives. This could differ from one institution to another. These are some common format of which they can be used. For instance, some universities have the format that you need to have the aims of the study. From the aims of the study, you go for the research questions. That from the aims, you construct the research questions or research hypothesis. And then from the research questions or research hypothesis is where we can formulate the research objectives. That is one format of which some university has. The other format is some format could start with the aims of the study. From the aims of the study, you go for the specific objectives. From these aims, you have the specific objectives. And from these specific objectives, then you formulate the questions or the hypothesis. Some universities has a different format where they start with the general objectives. From these general objectives, you formulate the specific objectives. And from this specific objective, then you will have the research questions or the research hypothesis. The other is that you will have the research questions, or you start with the research questions. Then from these research questions, you formulate the general objectives, and from the general objectives, you go for the specific objectives. That is the other styles. The other style is you start with dialect after you have you wrote of your statement, problem statement, you go dialect to the specific objective of the research, and then followed by the questions. Some format could be even a little bit different, such that you find you state one research questions or one hypothesis, and then within that particular hypothesis or research objective, you formulate more subsections of the multiple research questions. You state just a single questions, and from that particular questions, you'll be followed by a sequence of some questions regarding on how you are planning to answer that particular questions. The other format is that you will be having one research objectives. And from that research objective, you construct as more as possible number of multiple questions. These are some of the hypotheses and formalities on what we can write the research objective and researching questions and what can be undertaken. Therefore, sometimes we do read literatures from different sources and we come in contact by finding different formalities, and we sometimes get confused as to which one could be the best for us to follow. But today I'll be telling that despite of these formalities and whatever, you should not be bothered with. What is important is to look for what the format is taken by your universities, because your universities has one of the formalities within these contradicting formalities. You can be taking these notes from somewhere and find that wherever you try to write a proposal on, particularly on what can I arrange the difference between the research objectives, research questions and processes and whatever, could be much sometimes confusing. But remember that formalities could differ from one institution into another, and the formality is very important, such that it would the one that would direct you to the point of interest. So today I'm going to tell you under whatever the formalities is, but what are the important scenarios you should take into consideration while writing the research objectives. There are important cyclic relationship between these four important parts of the research. Generally, we start from, we have the topic, and not the topic. From the topic, we have the title, as we said the last times. And from the topic, it's where we formulate the aims of the study, or sometimes we go there, we call the general objectives. And from these general objectives is where we are going to have a single paragraph containing all the parameters to be performed using general verbs. There are some general verbs of which we are going to use. It's like to understand. Understanding is the general term of which is not easily to be measured and assessed. And then from these general objectives is where then we are going to formulate the specific objectives. Under the specific objectives is where we are going to break down the parameters from the general or the general objectives into the specificity one, following the concept we call it SMART. Soon I'm going to tell you what is the SMART, where S is standing for the specificity and M standing for the measurable, A is standing for loss, and then we go for the next. So with this particular aspect, let me consider this cyclic relation, that after the specific objective, this specific objective should reflect some aspect from the topic, and then the cycle restarts again. The cycle goes until the research is where we call research is a cyclic phenomenon. Before we go into a detail of the things, let me use a simple example here such that it will be helpful for you to understand these scenarios. Take this. So take these hypothetical examples here. Suppose we are having our topic, which is the topic, the title is Current Status of Plant Species Diversity, Productivity and Stocking Potential in Community Conserved Forest. That could be our title. And then from this title, we are going to formulate the general objectives or the aims of the study. Aims of the study of the general objective is nothing rather is the section that tries to describe, to give better understandings of the topic. Because the topic could even sometimes portray a message which is not easily understood. Therefore, it's the aims of the general objective that portray a meaningful and descriptive phenomena regarding the topic. Now, for instance, from these particular examples, you will find that the overall objective of the study is based on the assessment of the current status, determination of the available plant species diversity, and the quantification of both herbaceous and the tree species biomass productivity. You see, so from the aim of the general objective, it's now the information is clear
that, this study is aiming at making assessment of the current status and making determination of the available plant species diversity, as well as making quantifications of the herbaceous and the tree biomass productivity. From the title, it was simply current status, plant species diversity, productivity, and the stocking potential. Then, to the general objectives, it has trying to give it more descriptive, that he is going to look the current status and he is going to make determinations of the available plant species diversity. And he will make, or she will make, a quantification of both herbaceous and a tree. So he is going to deal with herbaceous and a tree species and not the other plant related parameter. He is going to, or she is going to conduct his study related to only herbaceous and biomass productivity. So from these general objectives is then now we have the specific objective. So specific objective meaning you are going to show the specificity on the exact activities. What are you going to do in order to achieve these general objectives you are intending? So you can find the general objective is simply a single sentences with 3 to 5, 3, 4 to 5 rhymes or sentences. But on the specific objectives that you now narrow down, break down each parameters from the general objective into a specific ones. As you can see now from there, that is specific objectives, that number 1, to assess the current status. That is 1. He is going to assess the current status. So assessment of the current status is 1. Specific objective, the exact activities what is going to do. The second is to determine the tree species diversity. You can find those verbs. I will tell you later on what that important verbs will be used. And objective number 3, to quantify herbaceous biomass productivity. You see, he is going to quantify. So you will be finding the specific activities of each of these specific activities has been reflected from the general and from the title as well. Though the title, it was so general, more broader, the general objective trying to describe more of the topic, and the specific objectives is giving the exact activity that he is going to do. The first one is to estimate tree carbon stocking potential. Okay, you see, he's going to estimate tree carbon stocking potential. Then it's from this particular area, then one can be in position to differentiate between the general objectives, specific objectives, and how you can formulate them. So while writing the general objective, we normally use the general terms, of which it will comprise all the parameters that you are intending to do within a single paragraph. While writing the specific objectives, you narrow down, you break down the general objective into specified activities that you are exactly planning to do. And it's within from these specific objectives where it will provide some reflections even of the method that you will be doing to achieve that particular objectives. For instance, when you speak of to assess the current status, you will be having that, okay, assessing of this current status, what can I do to assess this? It will be good. Then determination, you know that I'm going to make a determination of some species. You are going to quantify, how can I quantify? And I'm going to estimate, how could I be estimating? All this, they will be giving you the specificities on what are exactly you are going to do to achieve the title and the objectives of your study. While writing for a specific objectives, you should consider these important things. There is what we call the SMART, a word called the SMART. This one. This is the SMART here. You
can this one here, the SMART, this way, and this particular scenarios, S standing for specificity, M standing for measurable. That the specific objective should be stated into a specific kind of statement of which it free from any ambiguity. For instance, somebody may say, I'm going to assess and measure. That is ambiguity. You specify, I'm going to do 1. Each statement should decrete and should specify a particular activities of which you are going to do. And the terms which is used should be measurable, that you can be in the position you can measure, and should be achievable, and should portray some sort of realistic, and it should indicate a certain user of the time or time frame. Therefore, as I said, there are several terms, or we call them languages, verbs, of which can be used while formulating the specific objectives. The specific objectives from which is very important for us to know is the one that will provide and then will give us what objective, how can I formulate the questions, and how can I formulate the hypothesis. It is the specific objective that give us for us about the questions and the hypothesis. That's why we are concentrating on that particular area. So we have some terms of which we need to take into considerations while doing this. And these terms could even vary depending on the types of the approach of the research under which you are doing. If you are doing for descriptive statistics, it could sometimes differ from the analytical. And when you are doing the conceptual research, you could also have some terms which could differ from the empirical. And when you are doing the field related, could even sometimes differ from the simulatory kind of research. And sometimes also we consider the cognitive learning. For example, if you are dealing with the knowledge or level of understanding, the knowledge, that's according to Bloom's taxonomy. Knowledge, you can send to identify, to indicate, to record, or to list. When you go for the comprehensions, you can use verbs like to associate, to classify, to compute, to describe, to estimate, to predict. When you go for the applications, knowledge, you can say to apply, to calculate, to demonstrate, to examine, to locate, to manipulate, to sketch, etc., etc. You can go for to analyze, to detect, to determine, to experiment, and to summarize. When you go for this synthesis level, you can use terms like verbs like to arrange, to categorize, to codify, to compile, to design, to develop, to construct, to create, to formulate. These are some of the verbs of which they can be used. To assess, to compare, to measure, to criticize, to exemplify. When you are doing this practical related activity, to diagnose, to visualize, to arrange, to assemble, and any more of the right. These are some of the examples that to investigate this and this and this. Then you start with to assess. So you should state the verb in its nice and measurable perspectives. To investigate this and this and this, to assess this one, to analyze this one, to quantify this one, to compare, to verify, to clarify, to measure, to evaluate, etc., etc. So thank you for today's. I have tried to explain to you some relevant information. Follow me on YouTube as normal. You can find a lot of information regarding these things. So next series, I am going to tell you why do we use a research questions, or why do we use a research hypothesis?
what are the differences between questions and hypotheses, and what condition do we prefer for the research questions, and at what condition do we prefer to use the research hypothesis. What are the conditions that could bring about the variation and the usability and the applicability of these two terms? And why do we opt for the testing of the null hypothesis and not the alternative hypothesis? Should we write both null and alternative hypothesis within the same sentence, or what are the required information should be considered while using the hypothesis? And then that could be the very interesting part of the research, of which is important for us as researchers. As I said, my YouTube is so-called research techniques and a concept that I will be giving some relevant information related to some technicals and concepts in research, of which is very useful for us to take, and I will be giving us a way to further improvement. Thank you. Welcome for the next series. Don't forget to subscribe, share, and comment for the video that I upload. And if you are getting some relevant information that you need to share with me, or you need to get more information, don't get worried. You can contact me as normal. Thank you.